Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 171. So glad you could join me. Today's guest, Joan Kwon Glass, is here. She'll be with us in about 10 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle's a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry and I do too. So please do click the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Click the bell for notifications. Leave reviews on any of the pod-catching apps that you might be listening to this on later. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet is greatly appreciated because that is how poetry spreads these days. It's not through books very often. So we're happy to spread it here through podcasts. So please do help those, push them along. Now, as always, we're going to start with a Poets Respond poet. And the Sunday poet couldn't be here, so we'll read Blank in a little bit. But first, we have a preview of tomorrow's poem by our Rattle favorite, Francesca Bell. She's here right now. Hey, Francesca, how you doing?
I'm fine, thanks, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you again. It's been a little bit, but I love how you're always on the show. I'm looking forward to coming up next year. We're going to have you on with new books.
Yes, I have two new books coming out. One is a translation, so I didn't actually write those poems. I just rendered them into English.
Well, those are some Max Sisner poems, which we had. I think we published two of them now, right? Max's poems?
I think three.
Three, yeah. So 3 poems from that book. But yeah, looking forward to that when they come out. Do you want to explain what tomorrow's poem is going to be about, those small parts?
So tomorrow's poem was inspired by several very strange things that all came together into a poem. My toilets replaced, and my dog escaped. And after that, I read a poem about a foot having been found inside a shoe on a local beach. And it was such an odd article, the tone of it, that somehow that sparked me to write this poem. And I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read it right now, and then
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Small parts. After the plumbers leave, having installed new toilets because the old ones failed to whisk fully away what our bodies discarded, and we are of an age where we crave the satisfaction of good and final riddance, of never seeing again what we have chosen to set down, the ultimate sweet pleasure of divestment. And after they have accidentally allowed my old beagle to escape, and I walk up and down the streets calling and whistling, and return to find her waiting at the front door, triumphant, a long dead bird's leg bones gripped in her mouth, talons still attached. I read in the paper that a foot was found on a beach in Richmond, still laced into its Saucony shoe. And the article asks breezily for the public's assistance, as if someone has unwittingly lost a right foot, size 6 or 7, perhaps while out running, before going on to clarify that every couple of months, small parts of people wash up on Bay Area beaches, mostly fingers or feet, broken loose at the water's slow insistence from the bodies of suicides who've tossed themselves whole from one bridge or another, dropping as that bird must have, finished finally with the entire enterprise, believing the bay to be as powerful as a new toilet, able to afford a person the simple luxury of washing away the whole stinking, burdensome mess. But something keeps keeping us, a scavenging dog, a tide, a faulty toilet. Even the bay, unable to stop our little bits, our wasted, torn apart pieces from clinging to shore in refusal.
Yeah, beautiful and heartbreaking poem, Small Parts by Francesca Bell. And so how did that poem come to be? How did you go from the shoe to where you took it? Do you have any sense of that?
Well, I have suicide on my mind pretty heavily right now. We've grappled in my own family with a lot of trouble with suicidality. And then since February of 2021, we've lost 4 people in our broad circle to suicide.
Oh, wow.
And the most recent one was just a couple of months ago, a family member. And so I think suicide was already on my mind, and I'd been thinking a lot about how much we humans try to let go of things and can't. That's been sort of a theme that has been running through my mind lately, maybe because we're approaching a new year.
Hmm.
And so somehow all of this sort of came together in my mind. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what a tangled web there is up there.
Yeah, definitely. And it by coincidence, it happens to be the topic of tonight's main guest. Night Swim is about suicide and recovery, too. So that'll be the theme of the show, I guess. But it's such an important issue right now, and so much is going on post COVID and for so many reasons. And this poem reminded me of I don't know if you've seen the documentary about the San Francisco Bridge and the jumpers. There's a
I
documentary
haven't,
about that, and it is
haven't
just
watched it.
I know it is just seeing video of people like they're so far out that nobody can get to them in time, but like thinking about it and things like that is just such a heartbreaking thing. And yeah, so really important topic. Thanks for sharing this poem, Francesca, and it was a pleasure sharing your work.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
And I can't wait to hear Joan.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And you next year some point when your books come out.
Okay, great.
Very cool. Thanks, Francesca.
Good night.
Good night. That was Francesca Bell. You can watch her full episode. It was Rattlecast number, I don't even remember. It was pretty early on, like around 20 or something. I remember there was a fire going on in near Francesca's house, and she was on a backup generator. So it was a pretty eventful Rattlecast then. I think it was around number 20 or 18 or something. So go back and check that out if you would. She's a great, great poet. But for now, we're going to take a quick break and go to another great poet. Joan Kwon Glass is here. So sit tight. I'm going to put up some bumper music, make sure everything's working, and I will be right back in just a moment with today's main guest. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. As I said, tonight's guest is Joan Kwon Glass. She's the mixed-race Korean-American author of Night Swim, which is right here by Diode Editions in 3 chapbooks. She serves as editor-in-chief for Harvard Review, as a Brooklyn Poets Mentor, as a proud Smith College graduate, and has been a public school educator for 20 years. She serves in the faculty of Hudson Valley Writers Center and the Fine Arts Work Center of Provincetown. Whose work has won a bunch of awards, and she's been published all over the place. You can find her at Joan P. Glass on Twitter or joankwongglass.com. She is the current poet laureate of Milford, Connecticut, where she lives with her family. And here she is, Joan Kwon Glass. Hi, Joan. How you doing?
Hi, Tim. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's a pleasure to read this book. And first of all, I have to say, this is the most beautiful cover. I'll put it on screen. But this is the most beautiful cover of a book I've seen in a long time. And a very touching, heartbreaking book, very similar to Francesca Bell's content-wise, of course, the topic that it covers, heartbreaking book. Do you want to start out by reading a poem?
I do, and I do need to shout out to the Diode Editions team because they put the cover together, and I just think it turned out to be the perfect cover for the book, and I agree it is really beautiful. So I'm going to read the title poem called Night Swim, and just to give a brief introduction to how I wrote the poem, I had read an article about a man trying to escape North Korea who swam through the East Sea and ended up making it to South Korea. And in diving gear and wandered around on land for a couple of hours before he was discovered. And some of his wandering was caught on camera. And so I was able to see some of that footage and read the article about it. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And this poem, Night Swim, ended up becoming the title poem for the book. Night Swim. In February, a man in flippers and wetsuit swims undetected across the East Sea, along the border of North and South Korea. Once on land, he crawls through a drain beneath barbed wire, walks for miles before being caught. Video footage shows him at 4 a.m. in Gosan village, security tower strobe light flashing out, exposing him. He takes a few steps forward, then teeters back, hesitates, confused, afraid, and hypothermic. How many of us have swum through current of grief or shock, only to find ourselves disoriented, standing on the shore of a strange country? After loss to suicide, the landscape doesn't change, but everything else does. They don't release the man's name, don't show his face, only the back of his body as he staggers forward in the darkness, trying to convince himself, I am home. I am home.
And that is Night Swim, the title poem to Joan Kwon Glass's newest book from Diode Editions, Night Swim, with that beautiful cover. So the book is about just really a heartbreaking story, a family story. And I wondered if, is that what led you to writing poetry in the first place? A lot of people are drawn toward poetry as a way to deal with grief in the first place. It's a really productive way to do so. And I know I've talked to a lot of poets who something like that happened, and that's what made them start taking poetry really seriously as a way to get through that. Is that the case for you, or are you writing poetry already?
I've been writing poetry since I was 5 years old. But I think what happened was after the losses that I had, I lost two close family members to suicide in a very short period of time. My sister and my 11-year-old nephew, Frankie. And after that, I think that also coincided with reading a book by Eugenia Leigh, who I know you know, and I just adore her, and she's one of my favorite poets. And that book really helped me kind of develop the courage to write the poems that are in Night Swim. So I don't know that grief brought me to writing poetry, but this book definitely wouldn't exist if I didn't have a need to write through my grief and to come to understand it. And also if I hadn't read that book and other books by poets who had experienced similar losses.
Yeah. And that Eugenia Leigh was a guest on the Rattlecast in '89, if anybody wants to go back and talk about that book that you were talking about just now. Yeah. And so how did the book come to be? Like, how did you know that was a topic that you needed to write about?
Well, the first year after I lost my family members, I really didn't write at all. I was dealing with a lot of shock. I was diagnosed with PTSD and just dealing with a lot of nightmares, and kind of just trying to survive raising my kids, continuing to work as a teacher, and just really live in the world. After those losses, the world looked really different, and I didn't feel like the same person. But after that first year, I began writing poems. I wrote a few poems at a time. And then COVID happened, and I found myself in my house with my grief, and needed a place to put it, and just started waking up extremely early in the morning and writing before I started teaching on Zoom. So the book, there was a chapbook that came before this that came out through Small Harbor Publishing, Harbor Editions, called How to Make Pancakes for a Dead Boy. And some of the poems that are in Night Swim were in that book first. And then very soon after, Night Swim was picked up as a full-length collection.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hear another poem.
Sure. This poem is called First Sunrise, and it's about the first morning um, after learning that I had lost my nephew, that my nephew had died. And I didn't sleep that night. And I actually went to work to leave sub plans. And I think I was also kind of in shock, and I just followed my usual routine. So this is about that experience of watching the sun come up on the first day after you've lost someone that you love. First sunrise. 10 hours after he died, I stood at the copy machine with the other teachers, photocopying readings for my substitute. I hadn't told anyone yet. As I held the book down against the glass to scan it, a green laser lit up the room. My hand became an alien hand, the air some exotic, otherworldly vapor. But then the math teacher snapped at me for putting the wrong color paper in tray 4, and I was still human, oxygen filling my lungs. The Spanish teachers chatted in Spanish as students jostled each other in the halls or walked with their heads down. The sun had not yet risen on that first day without him in the world, but it did. It has every day since.
Yeah, it's a great poem. That's First Sunrise, again from Night Swim. And just such a wonderful ending. The understatement there. Do you remember how you ended up writing to that place at the ending? It has, but the sun, but it has every day since.
Yeah, that's a great question because and the answer is that that's just what I lived every day. That first year in particular, I was almost angry when the sun came up.
Mm.
I found myself becoming angry at things that it didn't make sense for me to be angry about. For example, someone would smile at me in the hallway, and I would get this feeling like he's dead. How can you be smiling?
Mm-hmm.
Or, just looking for somebody to blame, and just wishing that the world kind of reflected the loss and the grief that I was feeling. And a lot of people really identify with this poem. And I think it's because it's kind of a universal feeling, of how does the world go on when you lose someone that you love so much?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the book reads like a guidebook for going through this, for knowing what the experience would be like, because it goes really, it's in very intimate terms through almost chronological order through the 5 stages of grief, as the 5 sections are. And it makes me think about how that seems to be the point of literature, is to give people experiences so they can be prepared for experiences or know that other people have gone through the same thing, to have that human connection. Did you have a sense that you were writing the poems for yourself or for people who are going through the same thing? Or did you think about that at all while you were doing it? Or was it just you're a poet, so you make poems and this is what you do?
I actually really didn't believe that this book would ever be published. Um, Not that I felt like a lot of the poems or the book as a whole wasn't worthy of being published, but I didn't know what press or what publisher would be open to publishing such a difficult collection, because there is very little light in this book.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just as I was writing it, I wrote whatever the truth was for me at that time, whether it was sadness or rage or not wanting to believe that it was true. I just wrote all of it without really thinking that it would ever be a book, or a book that anyone would buy. And I also didn't I didn't know of another poetry collection that um, really could serve as a guide. I had wished that there was something out there.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I've written the book and I've met other poets who've experienced this and other writers who've experienced it, um, I know that work out there. And I've become close with other writers who write about this topic and in community with them. But at the time, it was a very, I don't want to say lonesome experience, but it was a very solitary experience to write this book. And yeah, so I think that's the answer. I was really stunned when it was published.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what Taylor Mali said, because my experience in publishing a book like that is his book, The Wedding Stone, which was about his wife's suicide. And it was the same thing for him. It was that he, needed to write these poems, but he had no idea. He didn't think anybody would publish them, and he couldn't put them in any other book that included, regular topics that weren't this, because it's such a huge topic that once you start talking about this, like everything else is sort of seen in contrast to that, because it's such a big, traumatic, emotional event. And so, yeah, it was tough for him too in the same way. And but I think
I'm not familiar with that. I'm not familiar with the
yeah.
book. I'll have to check it
Oh,
out.
we'll send you a copy. We have enough. We'll send you a copy.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's The Wedding Stone. It's one of the Chapbook Prize winners from a few years ago. But yeah, do you want to read another poem?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to read one more about my nephew, and it's called Red Flags. I try to make it a point to read this poem in almost every reading that I do of Night Swim, because I think it's important for people to know what I saw and what was observed ahead of his suicide. This is Red Flags. In the video my sister posted of them singing along to the radio, my nephew looks terrified that his performance will disappoint her. Whenever my kids talked back or sassed me, he shushed them and froze, watched me the way small animals watch predators, as though something was inevitable. He asked his grandmother about heaven twice in 1 week, specifically whether pain disappears or we carry it with us. 2 weeks before he died, he ran away, rode his bike to the diner, sat alone in a booth. He waited for someone to notice he was gone.
Yeah, another heartbreaking poem. Those Red Flags from Night Swim by Joan Kwon Glass. And that's a topic that I definitely wanted to talk about too, because it's. I mean, I have 2 kids that are young, and the first thought you get is like, what, how, because so often it happens, you don't know. It's so unexpected from people. I mean, the people I've known who commit suicide you had no idea it was coming. And it was really hard to and then you go back and you look at what were the clues. It's so hard to know, what was there that might have warned you and might have helped. So what have you learned to look for, just in case anybody knows anybody who might need help?
What I've learned to look for is just based on my own experience. I mean, I could speak generally as an educator and as a parent too, and just what I've read. But obviously depression, isolation. I know there's a lot of research that shows that connection is incredibly important. I mean, for human beings in general, but especially for kids. So feeling connected to your family or to close friends or to some sort of a community, whether it's in your school or in the larger community, having a connection to something that gives meaning to kind of your daily existence. So even for someone who is depressed or has mental health issues of some kind, that if there's that connection and someone who's paying attention, that makes a huge difference. Or having an adult, I really truly believe that every kid should have an adult that they can tell anything to without being judged or worrying what that person will think about them. Somebody that they can ask for help if they need it.
Yeah. And a corollary to that, do you have any sense, because suicide, especially among teenagers, is increasing really rapidly at a frightening pace. Do you have any sense of what's causing it? Have you any, is there any kind of idea of what's happening?
That's a hard question to answer, I think.
Yeah.
it probably completely depends on the individual, on the family, on the situation. I know that, like a mental health crisis can come on really quickly, and it's not something necessarily that can be predicted. And especially with kids, they're changing so much so quickly. Um, but I just think that there's a lack of connection, of true connection, in this country in particular. We're up there on the list of countries with the highest suicide rates.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other countries that have very high suicide rates are countries where the expectations are incredibly high or the stress and poverty levels are extraordinary. But that's not the case
Mm-hmm.
in the United States. And so there are other factors. I see a lack of connection.
Yeah, I mean, it feels we were talking a little bit before the show started with Francesca too about social media and TikTok and all those things that the
Mhm.
kids are using, and the way that they're just, young people don't have the same connections as we used to when we were growing up, where we had like actual physical, friends and lived in the same area and did things together in the same room.
Yeah,
It's much more rare, and then you get the whole. The whole glamorous way that people can present themselves and make it seem like everybody else is doing okay and you're not, and maybe that's a factor too. Those are the things that come to mind for me. But something's definitely, something has to change because it's getting worse and worse, it seems.
agreed. And I think, something that really does need to change is the way that we handle mental health crises and the support systems that are in place and the availability of resources, I think is huge.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I was a counselor at a group home for mentally ill adults before this job, and just the resources were so scarce then, and they're even less now. And that was 20 years ago, and it was only certain people who had access to that kind of care, and most people didn't. And even then, the care was really stressed and strained, and people were getting burned out all
Mm.
the time. And there's just not much. Mental health isn't treated the same way as physical health in this country either, which is another big problem. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, let's continue with more poems. What do you want to read next?
Okay. Um, so I'm going to move on to some poems that include my sister. 2 months after my nephew Frankie died, my sister took her life. Um, and in the beginning, the first couple of years, they both passed away in 2017. The first couple of years, I didn't feel much more that I could identify other than anger. I was angry at her for leaving. I was angry that I hadn't been able to do something more than what I did. I lived very far away from them. They were in Michigan and I was in Connecticut. I was just angry at everything and everyone. And when my sister passed away, she left a journal behind that the police gave to me, along with other things. And I just refused to open it. And it was sort of my way of being mad at her, like the way that siblings are, like sisters can hold a grudge. And I could imagine her doing the same exact thing to me. We just had that type of a relationship. So I wrote, when I was writing Night Swim, my editor told me that she felt like there were some poems that were missing. And we tried to work through what those poems were. And so this is the last poem that I wrote for Night Swim, and it came from reading the police reports, reading the journal, looking at the crime scene photos for the first time. Um, this is called Elegy for My Sister's Journal. It's on page 29. When the policeman handed me your journal in the evidence bag, I left it there unread, claiming some small victory and refusing your final words. And when the psychic at a party claimed to have a message for me from you, I shook my head and said, no, thank you. A year after your death, I awoke to your fist, urgent, banging against my bedroom door. I could have opened it, could have given you the chance to unburden yourself. Maybe after I listened, you would finally have left me alone. The truth is, all of this could just be my strange way of taking a stand. My sister is gone, and no ghost can take her place. Can you see me here writing this poem, brooding in our childhood bedroom? Stuffed animals smiling stupidly from the dresser. I'm staring unblinking at the scorched doors, the way a child does when sulking. Keep your journal and your fist. Instead, give me the bag in which you took your last breath, the film that lifted away from your cheeks, cheeks I once compared to winter apples. Give me the last thing you laid eyes on, vase of fake flowers on the nightstand, your daughter's photo on your home screen, the window sealed shut from the inside.
It was Elegy from My Sister's Journal, from Night Swim once again, which we're reading by Joan Kwon Glass. So how do you go about writing poems like these when they're so intensely personal, and you have to find a way to connect with the reader, and engage in that way, and share them in a container that can be transferred to somebody else? Do you have any way of approaching that, with the reader in mind, of taking us on a journey? How do you go about writing a poem when it's so personal, and making it public, and something to be shared as well?
I mean, it's definitely, this type of loss is definitely very personal and it's very specific, but grief is not, and being human is not, and being angry when people think that you shouldn't be angry, that's a very human experience, And something I do try to ask myself when I'm writing is, why does this poem need to exist?
Mm-hmm.
Or why does this poem deserve to exist? So I think by asking myself those questions, and also asking myself what the truth is for me,
Mm-hmm.
and whether the poem that I'm writing, does this line really speak the truth, my truth, in the way that I want it to, and the way that I intend it to? Um, that's been an effective strategy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I've just kind of, my personality is to sort of not care what people think. And that's been a problem for me a lot of my life
Uh-huh.
personally. But in terms of writing, I think that it's been helpful because I'm really trying not to use a filter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not difficult for me. And I think also in the back of my mind, why a lot of these poems worked well is because I really didn't think they were going to appear in a book. Um, so other than just trying to be human
Mm-hmm.
and not use a filter, I don't really know that there's any other answer.
Yeah, and speaking of that, of um, not realizing the poems would be published, how has your family's reaction been? Is that something that you worried about before the poem would come out? Because there are things that are very, just very honest in a way that might upset people. Did you have
Mhm.
any reservations for publishing the book in the first place once it was accepted and you had that? I've had people many times at Rattle, actually. We'll accept a poem and then they'll say, "Oh, you know what? Maybe not. I don't know. I don't think." And if anybody's having those kind of doubts, I say, well, yeah, I guess we shouldn't if you're having that kind of doubts about the poem. Did you have any feeling like that, or did you, what was and what's your family's response been to it, for the people who know your nephew and sister?
Um, it's been mixed, mostly supportive. I've had some people that have been really upset by it. Um, and I try to remember that they're also human. Of course, I was upset that they were upset and I was hurt, and, we don't speak anymore. But that's okay. I'm okay with that because just like they're experiencing the truth the way that they experience it, this is the truth for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to be any other way, how to write any other way, or exist any other way, really. And in terms of family, I mean, are you even a poet if you don't have family that gets pissed off at you. I don't know.
Hmm.
I have tried hard to shield my mother. My mother has not read my books. She's read a few of the poems that I've shared with her from the books, but I didn't write any of this to hurt her or to hurt anyone else. And it's been interesting reading the poems now as opposed to when I wrote them 4 years ago, 4 years ago, because I'm not angry anymore.
Hmm.
I don't blame anyone anymore. But I had to go for myself. I just had to go through that for whatever reasons. That's where I was.
Hmm.
And in order to get to today, I had to experience that. And so I'm okay with it, and I'm really lucky in that my mother understands that also.
Hmm. Do you think? I mean, you mentioned how important truth is to your process and whether a poem deserves to exist. I love that, by the way. On our critique of the week, we always say, "Does this poem have a reason to exist?" But I like is it worth existing, or however you put it. I have to look back. But yeah, there's more to it than just is it worth it? Does it deserve existing? I like that. Um, but do you find that you find truth in the process of writing? Is that part of what drove you to write the poems?
Absolutely. I had no idea most of the time what the truth was for me until I started writing.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of came out line by line. Or you know, I would have an idea for a feeling that I wanted to convey or an image that stuck with me that I knew was worthy of a poem, but I didn't know how it was all going to come together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem.
sure. I'm going to read What I Regret, which is on page 42. This was originally published in Diode. And, once again, a very human experience of looking back on your last experiences, your last summer vacation, your last Christmas with the person that you've lost, and what you wish that you had done differently. But the thing is about regret, if you had done those things, it wouldn't have made sense at the time. So, regret is obviously is a very retrospective feeling, but in some ways it doesn't make sense to regret. Um, anyway, this is what I regret on page 42. Every summer, we spent a week at the lake. You and your cousins caught turtles and minnows before dinner, and they squatted enraptured over the creatures you'd found. They stroked the turtles' backs, picked them up when they wandered too far. When they stuck their whole hands in the bucket, giggling as the fish flurried through their fingers, you turned to me and said quietly, maybe we should set them free. On movie nights, you held a bag of M&Ms open on your lap and waited as your cousins took forever to get settled. They bickered about which pillows they needed, what spot on the couch they'd claimed, who had a bigger scoop of ice cream in their bowl, how it wasn't fair, and could they have more? You never asked for more of anything, not even when your life depended on it. I should have filled your arms with a blooming bushel of your favorite candy, found you a spot close to me on the couch, and asked you what movie made you the happiest. I should have summoned 1,000 turtles just so you could let them go. That last Christmas of your life, all I gave you was an Amazon gift card. I should have asked, what do you dream of holding? Before it's too late, tell me what your heart wants.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking poem. What I Regret from Night Swim by Joan Kwon Glass. If anybody has any questions for Joan, please do pass them along on Facebook or YouTube. I'm watching them both, and I will pass along any questions that you have. We do have one poem request for later, which maybe I'll ask. Kashiana Singh, by the way, wants questions for my mother. Is a request from Kashiana Singh. If you don't mind reading that at some point later.
Okay.
Nate Jacob asked a question. In dealing with such a personal and intense experience, how closely to actual events do you tend to stick? Is it just the facts, or is it acceptable to embellish in order to complete the message? The truth in poetry discussion he mentions. But yeah, I mean, I always think there's like a deeper truth to the facts or something like that. But how do you think of that?
These poems were pretty concrete. And I think one of the reasons that they were concrete and that they were, I mean, I don't know if I can say that everything is factual because it's the way that I remember things, so someone else may remember something very differently, but these are my memories and my experiences. Um, so in this book, I did try to write kind of a testimony or a testament to what I experienced and what I remember and what I observed and witnessed. But other poems, I definitely have done that. Like I can share an example. There's a poem in Chestnut Review that I recently published called Last Communion. And at the end, I refer to a priest because I was trying to make a certain point with the line. But I actually grew up in an evangelical church. So sometimes language or visuals, in order to get a desired effect, I might change things for that reason. But I don't tend to invent things. It's just kind of not how I write.
Yeah. Let's talk about your philosophy on poetry in general a little bit more, because you are the editor of Harbor Review or poetry editor of Harbor Review. I can't remember what your title is.
Yeah, editor-in-chief of Harbor.
Editor-in-chief,
Yeah.
there you go. And you've done other things, projects similar, I think, too. So what is your conception of what a good poem does? Like, what is the how do you go about writing a poem? How do you consider the line breaks and the pacing? Like, what do you consider as a poem to be finished? How do you go about it?
Oh my gosh, what a question. Um, so here's an interesting fact about me. I have never taken a formal poetry class.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when I'm asked that question, it almost makes me chuckle because I am not like a professional poet by any means. Um, I don't even know some of the terminology or like names of forms and structures and things. I'll have to look them up sometimes when people mention them to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I can say, if I were to define a good poem, I often use the expression that like this poem rearranged my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So poems that I remember, months, years later, or poems that I refer back to as inspiration
Mm-hmm.
or wanting to teach them for any particular reason. Um, but mostly it's like I want to be challenged. I want to be challenged in terms of my perspective. I want to be challenged emotionally. I really love it when an image rocks my world, like stands out to me and is unexpected in a poem. And in terms of line breaks and things like that, I probably the thing that I like using the most is enjambment. Um, and for me, I like to end a line thinking, okay, I want the person who's reading this poem to wonder what's going to come next. So ending or doing the line break, building the line break in, I guess, as a point of tension.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned poems. A good poem will scramble your brain. Do you remember the first poem that scrambled your brain? Is there any kind of first
Oh my
scrambling story?
gosh. I don't have any idea. First poem that scrambled my brain. Probably the first poems I loved as an adult reader were like Mary Oliver, Billy Collins. This is like way back in my 20s, Margaret Atwood.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but I don't remember the first. the first poem. I'm 46 years old. I don't remember a lot of
No, I
first
hear you.
things.
Yeah, for sure. Um, do you remember the first poem that you were surprised, where your own brain was scrambled? Because that's the fun of writing as a poet, when you get to scramble your own
Mm,
brain. I think, right? Was there
mm,
I mean, for me, I there is a first poem where I was writing as a freshman in James Longenbach's class, and there was a poem that, and I wasn't even taking poetry seriously, but there was a poem, and I was like, whoa, like I didn't know I thought that. That's strange. And I don't know those two things were connected, but there they are, and they're connected. Did you have an
mm.
experience like that in the process of writing? And it feels like that was my first poem, even though I'd been writing poems, for through high school for fun and stuff. It felt like that was the
Hmm.
first real one. Do you have any sense of that, of the first time something connected and surprised you?
I don't know if it was the first time, but one that stands out in my mind is the probably the first and only pantoum that I've
Mm.
ever written. I really struggle with using formal, like writing formal poems. I'm kind of obsessed with the way that Dorothy Chan writes triple sonnets. Like she just uses structure so brilliantly, and I don't feel like I do that very well. So I took a Pantoum class with Taylor Baez one day, and I was like, I'm gonna do this. Like I'm going to effectively use form.
Mm.
And I ended up writing a poem that had been forming in my mind for probably 30
Oh
years.
wow.
But I had never found a way to get it down on paper because the feelings behind it were so complicated for me.
Mm.
And that's the Pantoum that I wrote. And it's to this day the only Pantoum I've ever written, but uh, people really identify with it.
Mm.
And when I talk about the poem, I like to talk about how I do believe like there's some magic, there can be some magic in using form because certain poems are almost waiting for the right
Mm.
form
Yeah,
to
for sure.
appear.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it too. Um, So there's a question here from Dick Westheimer. He says, Tim talks a lot about poems as healing, not therapeutic so much as the process of making one whole again. Did you experience this in the process of writing the book?
I did not.
Mm, yeah.
And I actually feel like I experienced a breaking down while
Mm-hmm.
writing the book. Kind of, um, I tend to be a pretty guarded person emotionally, and me writing these poems was a process of like breaking down those barriers within myself, kind of like moving the mountains that I didn't even know were there,
Mm-hmm.
being able to name them, being able to navigate them. And I think since the book was published almost a year ago now, since the book was published, I've begun to heal,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like I'm in the very early stages of that just because of who I am as a person,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
not wanting to delve into things emotionally. Like the writing was the writing, the writing was I that's what I do. I'm a writer. I write. It was, that I had these experiences. They were horrific experiences. Even after writing books about them, I don't know that I'll ever fully emotionally um, or understand my own emotions
Mm-hmm.
fully. So I hope to continue healing and to keep kind of learning about what that even means, what it even means to recover from losing your only sibling and a nephew so young
Mm-hmm.
to suicide. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to stick around and find out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're glad you are. Let's hear another poem.
Let's see if I can find questions for my mother. Okay, so hi, Kashiana. Thank you for being here. Um, I have such a hard time with this poem. I think if there is any poem in this book that I feel badly for having written, it's this poem.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, I don't really believe in, I just think that regret is like a weird emotion because by writing this poem, I was able to get to the other side of the questions,
Mm-hmm.
not in terms of now I have the answers, but I was able to get through the anger, and just come to understand that sometimes there are no reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's the answer. So this is questions for my mother. I want to ask, when he questioned you about heaven, why did you choose angels? You could have pointed to the tulips opening. Why didn't you call for help as soon as you heard the gunshot? I mean, how can a gunshot in the next room sound like anything other than a gunshot? What if we'd written his obituary to say who he might have been, and instead of naming his survivors, listed those who failed him? How can you still spend every Sunday reading those stories about men who give up their firstborn to prove their love for God? Instead, I ask, why do you keep buying orange juice for my children when it has so much sugar? Their adult teeth have grown in already. They still have their whole lives ahead of them.
Yeah, and that was Questions for My Mother from Night Swim by Joan Kwon Glass. So you say that's the most difficult poem to look back at now. Do you, would you usually read that at a reading? And how do you feel like reading a poem like that you feel that way about?
I stopped reading that poem,
Mm-hmm.
actually. I was in a reading with Kashiana, and I think that I read that poem. And I love that she's listening to this, and I love that she asked me to read it because it's a really great reminder to me of what a process grief is and how you can be on multiple sides of it if you just stay in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I did stop reading it because it felt like an angry poem to me. But what's also interesting is reading it today, I'm not reading it as an angry poem. It feels softer. And so I read it more softly and it feels sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, do you feel like, given that it's so difficult to write this and you're still working through the healing, are you glad that you wrote this book? I mean, it's such a difficult
Mm,
subject, and there's some of the things that you regret that are in there, or not regret, but that you feel bad about. Do
mhm.
you feel like it was a good thing to do to write this book?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many reasons for it. One of them is a really selfish reason. I have met more survivors of suicide loss than I even knew existed. I mean, I knew statistically that they existed, but I've developed these friendships, and relationships with other writers who've also lost people to suicide and have also written poems or books about it.
Mm-hmm.
And just feeling like we are a community when before I wrote the book, it was a solitary experience. Not
Mm-hmm.
that there weren't people I didn't share the grief with, because there are people, my sisters, some of her close friends, some family members that I won't mention by name, but I've shared in their grief and we've all grieved differently. Losing a child is different from losing a nephew, and losing a sister is different from losing a daughter. And I actually live with my mother now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't regret it. I think, I got so much validation in terms of people reading the book and reaching out to me and just knowing that I've been able to pay tribute to the lives of these two people that I loved. And even as angry as I was with my sister, for the first couple of years. I feel like she would understand.
Hmm.
We had some similarities in that way.
Yeah.
So I don't regret it. I'm proud of this book, and I'm proud of the press that chose it. I think it was the perfect place for it to land.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful and important book, and there's an epigram at the beginning just to show the scale of this. Every year in the United States, more than 45,000 people take their own lives. Every one of these deaths leaves an estimated 6 or more suicide survivors, people who've lost someone they care about deeply and are left with their grief and struggle to understand why it happened. And so, I mean, we're talking about every year, 250 million people dealing with this topic, and increasing every year. So it's such an important topic to talk about. Have you been able to branch outside of poetry circles? That's one problem we have with poetry, is that people who love poems. But a book like this can be so important for people who have never read a poem since high school. Is there anything you've been able to do to get this book in the hands or the ears of people who don't usually read poetry but could use this book and the message?
I don't know. I mean, it's possible that I have. I'm not sure. I wrote a grant. I was a recipient of a state grant called Artists Respond through the state of Connecticut. And through that, I was able to put together community events. And a couple of the events focused on suicide prevention or survivors of suicide loss. And so I did meet people that way. And I think just bringing a general awareness to every time that you do a reading, sometimes it's friends that come, most of the time it's other poets. But I think the more that we write and the more that we can share about it, the more awareness there is. And just giving a voice to this entire, I call us an invisible tribe or invisible kith. Um, that we were always there, but we were quiet. We all kind of grieved privately. I think also because people don't want to hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible to think about losing someone that you love to suicide. No one wants to think about that, and neither do we.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just having that kind of community and being more vocal about it, whether it's poets or just, ordinary people in the community. I hope that it reaches more
Mm-hmm.
people than just writers.
Yeah. Well, one thing I do know for sure is that it reaches more people than we think. Because
Mhm.
with Michael Mark's chapbook about his dealing with his mother's dementia, for example, we had so many orders in the fall from people who are subscribers, so they already have a copy,
Mhm.
sending it to somebody else. And so when usually I have access to the whole database, so I know who already has the book and is sending a copy, but normally you don't. And so the number of people who send it to somebody is a way to just even reach out and make a connection to say, like, I know you're going through this, and this book might help, is probably a big thing that's probably happened a lot and done a lot of good.
Mm.
Yeah.
I read that. I received that in the mail, and I read like half of it so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that's caring for someone who's elderly and is something that isn't written about a lot either, like that whole process because it's difficult.
Hmm. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit before we go about Harbor Review, where you're editor in chief.
Sure.
Yeah. So what was it like? What is the position of Harbor Review? Why does it exist, and what does it do, and what do you look for in writing when people send you? And is it just poems or is it stories too?
Harbor Review is a poetry magazine. We also accept art, and it's a feminist magazine. We try to represent a diverse array of writers. And Allison Blevins, who is the director of Small Harbor Publishing, is the founder. She does more than like anybody I know in terms of projects. I don't know how, and she also was like raising a family. And my first chapbook, How to Make Pancakes for a Dead Boy, was published through Harbor Editions, and Allison chose it for publication. So that's how we got to know each other. And she invited me to step in. as editor-in-chief. So I'm still pretty new to it. I
Hmm.
still feel like I'm like editor-in-chief in training. You know, I have to ask a ton of questions and rely on other people to help me figure things out.
And
But
when was
it's
that? How long have you been doing it?
this is, I think, 6 months,
Hmm.
less than six
Yeah.
months. So, you know, really still learning, but it's an incredible team of editors. And something I've learned over these last several months is how much work people do,
Uh-huh.
like how many hours are spent, and it's all volunteer. Nobody is getting paid to do anything. And I know that people, you know, when you pay that $3 submission fee, you're like, I paid the $3, like this should happen, that should happen, this should happen. But behind the scenes, it's incredible how much free labor people are giving. You know,
Hmm.
just it's a labor of love. We do it because we love it and because we also want to contribute to the literary community. But I really didn't know.
Hmm.
I had no idea how much work it is, you know, for everybody on the team. But then the people who do the most work are the ones often behind the scenes too. It's not me, you
Hmm.
know, it's the poetry editors, it's the readers, it's our managing editor who, you know, without her, I don't know what we would do. Um, but yeah, so that's what I've learned, and the mission is, you know, it's to gather the most powerful poetry that we receive and make sure that we are representing diverse authors, diverse poets,
Hmm.
and with a feminist mission.
And have you learned anything about like what works in a poem or what doesn't that you might apply to your own work? Is there something you see in like submissions or poems you've read that give you a different perspective on writing?
Just that I feel like I will always never be able to answer that question.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to explain that. And I'm sure you've experienced this, that when you read a poem, you get chills or something happens in your chest or your gut, you know, that there's some magic in a powerful poem that I don't know that any of us could really explain. We can talk about use of imagery and line breaks and, you know, effective use of form and all of those things that people talk about. But I also think that poet's voice is something that's difficult to nail down
Hmm.
or difficult to concretize, you know, or describe in any kind of way. You know, I've read some poets who their voice is just so unique and so important that I feel like the words kind of fall around the voice.
Hmm.
And that doesn't even make any sense because we have
No.
to choose the words. But
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I've just learned to, I think, stay open, to continue staying open to the
Hmm.
magic
Yeah.
of poetry, and always, yeah, just look for that,
Hmm.
you know, and remain surprised.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that because I wanted to ask about your voice in the poems, because there's such a consistency to the voice. It's one of the things that stands out too, and I was wondering if because people always talk about that about what a poet's voice is, and how how to develop a voice. It's such a mysterious thing, like you mentioned. Did you ever have a sense that you didn't have your voice? Because this book, which is in the poems I've read that we published, they're all personal and feel like you speaking in a very authentic, clear way. Was there ever a time when you had trouble, like struggled to find a voice, and how did you find your own voice? Is there any story to that, or have you always felt that
Um,
way? That you just wrote authentically and ran with it?
well, look, I've sometimes looked back at my older poems, and even the poems from my last chapbook, which the title poem was published in Rattle, If Rust Can Grow on the Moon, and that was published with Milk and Cake Press. It's all about addiction and recovery. And I feel like my voice in those poems is very different
Hmm.
than the other books. So for me, sometimes the topic changes, you know, changes my voice, but it is very conversational.
Hmm.
You know, I do. I do like there to be a flow. I like to use commas because I like to be able to tell people where they should pause.
Yeah.
I know personally I have a harder time with poems that don't suggest that. That doesn't mean that there aren't fantastic poems that don't, but I'm more comfortable kind of writing the way that you would almost speak in a well-crafted sentence, you
Hmm.
know, as you were speaking. Um, so for me, that's important for the flow of a poem
Hmm.
is this something that if I were to say it out loud, that someone would be able to hear it, that it would be rhythmic and that it would be understood.
Yeah. So given that, do you read your poems out loud as you're writing? Like as you're, you draft a bit, do you read it out loud to feel if it feels authentic? Is that a part of your process?
I don't. I
Hmm.
read it in my head. So
Yeah.
I am a little bit weird about um like about listening to things. Like I hate talking on the phone.
Hmm.
I hate leaving voicemails. I prefer like writing things. But what happens is if I write something, I say it in my head. I don't ever actually say it out loud, but I think
Hmm.
that's just a quirk because I'm a very quiet, introverted person
Hmm.
that's really sensitive to sound. So I remember when I first started going to readings and reading my poems, I had such a hard time reading them out loud. And one of my first public readings was at Wednesday Night Poetry, which is run by my dear friend, like beloved friend, Kai Kagan. And she almost did some coaching, like,
Hmm.
you know, because I recorded this poem for her and I was like, this sucks. Like, I don't know how to do this. I know that I sound like a robot. I know my face looks very robotic, but I don't know how to change it. Um, and she's helped me a lot. And practice
Hmm.
too, you know, just practicing. And when you do these over and over, it becomes a little easier.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because you wouldn't have, I wouldn't have guessed. I don't think anybody would have that you don't enjoy reading the poems out loud and haven't, for forever. So it all feels very natural. Well, we are just about out of time. Do you want to finish out with one last poem?
Sure. Let's see. I'm going to read, I haven't read this one in a while. But my family is Korean. I spent a lot of my childhood in South Korea and some of that time on Jeju Island, which is kind of like a holiday island now, but it has a very long history in Korea. And so it's about um, the power in being able to see versions of the person that you've lost, who you love, and that sometimes that can bring comfort. This is called I Ask the Pearl Diver to Bring You Back from the Dead. The Haenyeo waddles toward the Jeju coast in her flippers and wetsuit armor, adjusts her diving mask, flashes me the peace sign, and takes the plunge. In the meantime, the other divers start a fire on the beach. They squat and warm their hands as I pace and try to catch a glimpse of you breaking the water's surface. One of them calls me over to share her abalone. Another tries to distract me with the baby octopus that squirms in her hand, writhes as though about to transform. Soon the Haenyeo calls my name, waves in victory, and there you are. Not the sad, quiet child I remember, but muscular and lean with darker hair, a man of 25 with a brave face and playful eyes. You swim toward me, race the Haenyeo, and she gives you a run for your money. You look up at me like a field of canola opening in the sun. When you pull yourself up onto the rocks, I embrace your glossy body and weep the way I did when you were born. The stilled volcano at Halasan rumbles. I whisper, how long do we have? To no one in particular. The other Hanyo applaud and chant your name, mostly for our benefit. They see this all the time. The creatures that grief pulls from deep, airless places, offering bright, wild treasures, even a version of the dead we are desperate to meet. Ribbons of seaweed blossom at our feet, and nearby, mollusks spin sand into pearls. Every darkness we bear hides such small mercies.
Yeah, that's a beautiful poem to end the book on and the Rattlecast on. That's the last poem from Night Swim by Joan Kwon Glass. Joan, thanks so much for being a guest. A really important work and really touching, moving to read. I read straight through the whole thing without putting it down. Thanks so much for sharing that and for going through and giving people who have similar experiences some sense of comfort and knowing that they're not alone.
Thank you so much, Tim, for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Good night. That was Joan Kwon Glass. Again, the book was Night Swim, which you can buy from Diode Editions. And you can find more of Joan's work at her website, which is joankwonglass.com. That's JONKWON Glass, GLASS.com. Find this book and all three of her chat books there. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to the open line, so I hope everybody sent or saved a poem. If you'd like to share a poem, how you do that is you go to Open Mic, that's openmic at rattle.com. Email your poem there, and then I can show it on the screen as I was for Joan and for Francesca's poems before. And then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy. I'm going to copy the Zoom link here and paste it into the chat windows on Facebook and YouTube, and you can follow us along there. But do send your poem first. Don't forget to send your poem. If you only want to listen, though, and you don't want to share poems, you just want to keep enjoying them, sit right where you are, either on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, and or later, and just listen there because it's the best place. So don't join the Zoom unless you have a poem to share. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back with more poems. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. The prompt for this week, which was given by Rick Lupert, last week's guest, so I have to say this in Rick Lupert's voice, was, I have a writing prompt called I Will Die on This Hill, which I thought up in the shower in Maryland a couple days ago. The idea is to either write a list poem of choices, each line choice ending with the line, and I will die on this hill. Could be funny, like a bar of soap is better than any kind of body wash, and I will die on this hill. Or heavier things. Another option is to write a longer poem detailing a choice which ends with the line. So that was the prompt for this week, the I Will Die on This Hill prompt by Rick Lupert. So I did not get a chance to write a poem this week, very busy week, and but let's see what you have. We have So far, 6 people have joined us, so I think we might have time for 2 if you want to share 2 poems. But like always, you can share poems about current events if you have any Poets Respond poems you'd like to share. You can also share poems from the prompt, or you can share poems you published recently and are proud of, and you can give me a link. I can show off them on their webpage if they have one. Always fun to share different poetry journals. So whatever you'd like to share, please do join us on Zoom if you got something to share. It's always a lot of fun. So first, let's go to Dick Westheimer. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
Oh, there we go. I'm almost ready for you. That's how I'm doing. I hadn't quite brought up my second poem yet. Once you said 2, so
yeah, I think we got time for 2. It's an early. We don't have any extra guests, a bonus round today, so I think we have plenty of time if anybody wants to share 2, as long as they're not like 8 pages, of course. I should say
Yeah.
there's always a catch. And
well, I do have a question. Have you ever seen an 8-page poem from me? And the answer is never.
No, never. I think 2-page max is Dick's.
With skinny lines.
Yeah.
That was such a moving interview. I mean, my guess is that everybody, more people than we know, and as Joan said, as soon as you are touched by suicide or by serious mental illness and proximity to you, you realize that the fraternity or sorority is almost immeasurably large. But the fraternity or sorority of people who are willing to talk as beautifully about it as Joan did is too small.
Yeah, very small. I mean, there's some of that in my family, and no one ever talks about it, like, dating way back. Yeah,
and we should talk to our kids about it if it's in our families, for sure.
Yeah, we definitely should.
Yeah. Well, so I did a Tim Green. I did a very quick prompt poem, which I did email to you.
Yeah, well, I didn't even do that because our water heater stopped working, so I had to kind of deal with that right before the show, and that was what, to be honest, that is what messed up the 10-minute before the show poem time. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll read my prompt poem, and then if I have time to fish out the second poem, I'll do it. It would be a Poets Respond poem.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay, so I sent it to you just a few minutes ago.
Is it untitled?
It is currently untitled.
Okay. Well, we can all suggest a title for you too as we read.
That'll be great. A one-word one, an absurd one, and yeah,
exactly.
Untitled. I was just beginning to wonder. Oh, so I just couldn't do the Rick Lippert thing. So I thought about his line, and this is what came. I mean, Rick can do Rick. Maybe the rest of you can.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm very curious to see what people can do, but let's hear it.
I was just beginning to wonder if we were mortal after 3 weeks in the desert, boots worn smooth from slick rock, from slipping on scree and sandstone, our skin wind-burnt, bruised by falls and badged by black flies, needed relief. I planned one last hike into the cool heights, where the sun soothed and was refuge rather than something to evade. So we drove through pine and aspen groves, painted green and white on the valleys and rising mountainsides, to the trailhead. From there to tree line, we 5, daughter, son, wife, and me, walked silent, so relieved, so sweet with the perfume of sap. There we spied the peak, still miles away across saddle and snowpack. We dropped our russacks, bundled on our fleeces, set off. At 12,000 feet, we seemed no closer. I couldn't breathe deeply enough to go on, and thought, I will die on this hill. There's the line. Yeah. As the others, lost in their own worlds, trudged on, oblivious. I curled up small, my back to the wind that whipped down the slope, sought shelter leeward of a lichen-covered rock, and was okay waiting forever for their return.
I love that ending, and yeah, I love the way that the prompt inspired that memory. That is great last couple lines there. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Dick. And then can you find the other one, or do you want to swing back to you later?
Why don't you swing back to me later so I don't hold.
Yeah, we'll do. Let's go next to it says Ann VW. I haven't figured out who that is yet. Hey, Ann, are you there?
That's me. Hi, yes. Yeah, hi. Greetings from the Philippines.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. There we go. And Widgerden.
Yeah,
right?
I'm married to a Dutch guy, so that's my unpronounceable name. Even I can't say it so properly.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I'm so glad you could join us. And you're calling from where was it? You said Indonesia?
Yeah, near Manila in the Philippines. Yeah,
excellent.
And and this is my I cannot possibly mimic Nick the last time. So this is my version, and it's not funny either. Sorry, but it reflects. It was such a great prompt, and I wasn't even planning to respond, but I was busy with something, and before I could stop myself, it raised all kinds of images in my mind. So this is the result.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm so glad you did. Here he is. And then the title, appropriately enough, is And I Will Die on This Hill. Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. And I will die on this hill. A hill to die on? It was but a burial mound filled with a truth kept secret from myself, buried within unholy sediments 5 decades deep. Though for 3.5, I have felt the poison, self-desiccating in the stranglehold of blackened roots. One podcast spaded out one hole, exposing cavern and my decomposing body of what could have been. This grief, this outrage, this not letting go, this time, this hill, the hill I will die on.
Oh, that's great. Love that ending too. I guess maybe this prompt, dying on a hill, makes people come up with great endings. And you sent some other poems too. Do you want to share one or two of these?
Yeah, which would you? There's one of 2 pages, and there's a short one.
I think we have time. We could do both. Why not? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Why not? Yeah.
Okay.
Just 3 poems from Anne.
So this one is written also very recently. On a few months ago, we traveled back to the Philippines from the Netherlands. So I'm kind of anticipating reverse culture shock because we live in the Philippines. So it's a kind of serious, humorous. Just anyone on a long haul who's experienced long haul flights hopefully will recognize this.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. It's called In Between Spaces. Amsterdam, Doha, Manila. Bladder, blood, and bones. A question of circulation, of movement in this suspended space. This airborne interim, a blessing in need of curation, of frequent mini trips, frequent untangling from wires, from seatbelt, then hoisting yourself over armrest into aisle, heading afterwards, and with any luck, no loo line awaits. Finally, a much anticipated trolley parks at our row. I have hunger, I have food, I will make this work. Marveling at humanity's capacity to operate in small spaces, if sufficiently motivated. I'm set a wondering how on earth my fellow passengers manage, should they be ganglier or bulkier than I, or accompanied by small children. Now I focus, elbows tucked in, every millimeter of tray space appropriated, attack, ice cold cutlery wrapped tight in a white, indestructible paper napkin. Blueberry globule sits atop a button on my husband's shirt, a badge of honor of being human, a dessert reminder of occasional non-apocalyptic failure, enveloped in face mask, eye mask, blanket, darkness cocooned in coma-induced sleep, optional layers of headphones and seat-back movie screen, flying, shaking, shaky, flyy, turbulence, adding an extra dimension to T. Cruz's maverick dogfights, all bundled up in 2 layers of marrow depth sound, machines' maniacal roar, air's atom-splitting whoosh. And on the edge of audible, our Sisters of Mercy in-flight personnel gleefully gossip about us in the back. Lights dimmed, Rambling thoughts on the name Paganini. Paganini. Don't think too deeply unless prepared to weep silently in the dark. Sleep and movie both, they cloister us from clashing realities, what we have left behind and what we have yet to face. Buried neath sand, nudges of time, a knee moves, then a finger, crystalline particles undulate, time undulates. Rushing forward, yet I am air suspended, this flight, my waiting room, my cigar tube in the sky, my airlock, my reacclimatization chamber between worlds. At an interior interim of stopover, we find ourselves admiring my husband's blue button remnants, still beaming its very brightness amidst the light and polish of Doha's million shiny surfaces.
That's great. Well, I was going back and forth because I had a chance to go to a conference in London recently, and the flights are actually cheap from LAX to London. And so I was thinking about it, and then I realized that it's like 13 hours on a plane, and I decided not to. And so for part of the poem, I was thinking, good decision, Tim. And then at the end, you kind of cheered me up a little bit. So thanks for sharing that. I'm still mixed about that long plane flights, but glad somebody does them. And so then a really short poem to end on. What's this last one?
Yes. So this one, this was written a few years ago. Mm-hmm. In a way, so I really, really appreciated that interview because also how poets help us face the things we need to face when we'd prefer not to face them. So this is very much reflects the political situation in the Philippines 5 years ago, but also today. Mm-hmm. It's called The City Burns. Pondering the actor with his brilliance, enticing me into ecstasies of morbid intrigue, evil as entertainment, as evil reigns. Weeping and hysteria tumble me downstream, heartbreak and madness, the horror of missing the brain-stoppingly obvious, forgotten child, abandoned parent, scraping the fiddle while the city burns.
Yeah, great political poem there. Thanks very much for sharing that. And joining us, I think first time you've been on, I believe, Anne, right? Yeah.
Yes,
well, I hope you come back. And it's great to see sun. Make sure everybody can see that sun out the window, which none of us in the United States are getting right now. Yeah. Thanks so much. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Hope you do again.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye. That was Anne Van Widgerden with 3 poems there. Yeah. Thanks for sharing those. Let's go next to Guy Chambers.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Guy. How you doing today?
Oh, really good today. I didn't have a prompt poem. I really liked the prompt, but I was so busy with other things. But I just want to announce that these 2 poems I got here, I hope I can read them both, is I got published in a book. It just came out. Can I show it online?
Yeah, just hold it up. Yeah, go ahead.
Just this one here is out of Calgary, Alberta.
Here, hold it up one more time because I didn't get the screen big enough fast enough. There you go. Oh, the Prairie Journal. Okay.
Yeah, and I've been publishing there before a few years back, but I decided to switch over and trying to get other magazines get published in there, and they just sent that out just now. It just got published, and they've been going for quite a few years, and that too. So, and this first poem is called Sunday, and it's part of life. You know, everybody goes through this part of this life, and this is about an older couple. You know, it's too bad they have to go through this, but they do. And so I call this Sunday. A gentleman, as another Sunday afternoon begins, in a stale room, absent of perfume. Staring out a broken window as a sunny day glow, there by a dresser, and inside the dresser drawer, that's where the Bible is stored. Quiet and shy, watching the sky go by with a sigh. All spruced up, all the nevertheless, in his Sunday's best, black tie and tail, threads so detailed, always the same as before. Grips his cane that holds his pain, heads out of the gloom of the apartment room. That's popcorn rent, which much time is spent. Here's a radio and a hallway echo, stepping down the stairs that creaks. The lighting so bleak, opens outside door so antique, with irritating squeaks. Heads down the street, slow steps in his feet, to his Sunday's restaurant, where he's been going for so long. A table for two, that has to do. Now looks down the avenue, lays down his nickels and dimes, what he's done for some time, to order a dish, a soup and fish for two. At their belly full, he heads out the door and goes down the avenue to pick up a special flower so colorful from his favorite flower shop. They're so thoughtful, just for him on every Sunday. With his spirit, Will goes up to the hill, to God's green acres, way down the avenue, sits on a bench across from a headstone, sitting there all alone, all alone. The name on the headstone calls to mind, the whispers so fine, fingertips touch so in much, hugs forevermore, snugs forevermore, speeches nevertheless, for many words have been already been spoken. Love is so hard when you give yourself away, but still being there, still being there. A deep smile keeps a while. He lays the flowers down as many times before beside the headstone, knowing he's not alone. A tear comes to his eyes. Thank you for that one. Yeah, if that one's too long, it's okay.
Yeah, because people keep coming in. So I think when I said it was a light open lines, we had 6, now we have 12. So I think we're going to switch back to one poem apiece. And but thanks so much for sharing that, Guy. That was
okay. Thank you very much.
Wonderful poem. Yeah, Sunday by Guy Chambers. Thanks so much, Guy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Guy. And then next up, let's go to Kashiana Singh.
Tim, can you hear me?
I can. How you doing tonight, Kashiana?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having Joan. She is the most beautiful poet I've read and heard in the recent past. So thank you for having her.
Yeah, definitely our pleasure. Very beautiful book, very moving.
Very moving. If you haven't, and for anybody else who's listening, How to Make Pancakes for a Dead Boy, the chapbook she mentioned, that's beautiful as well. So if you would like, you should read that.
Yeah, people should for sure.
Let me know when you're ready. The poem I'm going to read, it's not a prompt poem, Tim, but it's inspired by Joan's work. It was written many years ago, and it's from my first collection, Shelling Peanuts and Stringing Words. But I always like to read it, sometimes with Joan, definitely following her.
Oh, that's great. Well, yeah, I'm glad you can. It's checklists, right?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready. I have it.
Okay. Checklists. Advanced planning services for funerals blinked the signboard as if apologizing for its own presence. Casket and flowers, check. Obituary and a tombstone, check. Wine and music, check. Prayers and a rabbi, check. A guest book, maybe. Photographs beyond budget. I walked in, the ghostly white lady at the front desk smiled, skirting my glance. Do you have a survivor's guide? Does it explain the process of saying the last goodbye? Have a coaching class for someone who has not been able to bid goodbye? At least not in an authentic, honest way. She looked at me and said, sorry. I walked out and back beyond the blinking lights. Is there even a need to say goodbye? As per the funeral code of conduct, is the survivor's checklist violated if one chooses not to? I don't think I ever will. There are no goodbyes when you love someone within your ribcage. It does not matter. Adios means till we meet again.
Yeah, excellent.
Checklists.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kashiana. That was Checklist by Kashiana Singh. Great to have you on. Thanks so much for sharing that poem.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
you too. It was Kashiana Singh, and Kashiana had an episode of the Rattlecast maybe, God, it's so hard to remember these days after doing this for 3.5, I guess, years. I think it was like 2 years ago, maybe, or maybe it was just last year. I'm not sure. But look back and find Kashiana's episode. It was a great one. Let's go to Mike Bales next.
I just have one poem, so it's going to work now.
Perfect. Yeah, excellent.
It's a prompt poem that I sent you last night.
Mm-hmm.
I was picking my hills, and the easiest thing to write about were the hills in southwest Wisconsin. We've got the driftless region,
Mm-hmm.
which is an area untouched by glaciers, but debris is dumped that form the hills in southwest Wisconsin, northwest Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
northeast Iowa, southeast Minnesota, and it's about going through the hills of Wisconsin. And I was going to and from, or maybe this time going to some work assignment in Wisconsin. And it's called My Driftless Dream. It's a pantoum. The highway going north from Spring Green winds its way through hills as the new journey begins. From Spring Green, a collage of forests and fields as the journey begins. A sigh, I will die in these hills. A collage of forests and fields, untold beauty at every turn. A sigh, I will die in these hills, my driftless dream. Untold beauty at every turn, untouched by glacial ice. My driftless dream, a passage in Wisconsin. Untouched by glacial ice, the story of the land unfolds. A passage in Wisconsin, where my heart finds a home.
Excellent. Yeah, that was great, Mike. I always love that form, the repetitions in that. Really well done. My Driftless Dream by Mike Bales. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, take care. Next up is Carla Schwartz.
Hello.
Hey, Carla, how you doing tonight?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you. I sent you a few poems, but one of them was just a prompt poem that I only just was able to type up tonight. But I will do the one. I actually wrote a poem called Night Swim, which I have not read in a million years, from a book that I wrote, which is called Mother, One More Thing, which I did right after my mother passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 2014 Turning Point Books. And so I'm going to read this poem, which is not sad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just so you know. Night Swim. Let me just get it down here. Hang on. So, after a day's work at the home office, after packing the car with camping gear, after the long drive slowed by traffic, after pulling into the campground and snagging the last spot on the pond, after the hour it takes to park the car and set up the tent, in the darkening light night and the dripping rain, after finally eating what would constitute dinner, 4 carrots with hummus while seated in the driver's seat of my parked car, after a day of not even stretching, after gathering my swim gear, clothing, and towel, headlamp affixed, I stepped down the steep root-strewn path that must lead to the pond. In the almost dark, the sky drizzles. Before stepping in, I strip and don my goggles, cap, and fins. I make a mental note of my entry point and its surroundings. A big secluded rock, a small cove, an opening in the trees. There is no moon. My splashing strokes, the birds, and the constant drip. By the time I'm ready to stop swimming, the sky is clear, the Big Dipper revealed. A Venus peers down at the lone nude swimming in the dark. After I think I'm nearing my entry point, after trying one cove and the next, after every opening in the trees looks like the other, after swimming in and out of each cove, after approaching every big rock twice to find them blocked by dead wood, wrong, grasses, wrong, other stones, wrong, all the while swimming a repetition of coves. After wishing for my glasses and my suit, after considering a cry for help, could I spend the night on a rock or sleep in the shallows? Do the turtles sleep and the fish, or do they nibble all night? Should I swim to a beach and walk out on the road naked without light? I am Venus without her shell, only fins. Would I purse my coy smile if caught?
Yeah, excellent poem. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was a night swim, of course, and definitely a different direction for taking it. Beautiful poem, and yeah, sounds like a great night.
Thank you.
Definitely does. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. That was great. Okay, that was Carla Schwartz with Night Swim. Next, let's go to Nate Jacob.
Hey there, Tim.
Hey, Nate. How you doing tonight? Good to see you.
I'm doing okay. That was a great interview today.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a great book.
It was. I had to control some tears there for a while. That was really good.
Yeah.
Well, I wrote a prompt poem inspired.
I think this was a tough prompt to do. I'm impressed that so many people are giving it a shot.
I had a hard time identifying any rise in the land I was willing to die on.
Yeah, it is tough. The soap. I could
Here
go, if I gotta die, I'll go either bar or body wash. It's okay.
Not a bad way to go. So I wrote what constitutes a not very good poem, but here I'm.
I'm glad you could share it. Let's hear it.
I will die on this hill. Socks pulled to the correct length up my calves. Soup in the Goldilocks zone, briefly just right. A winter hat that fits well, but doesn't ruin the hairdo. Sunlight through a dusty window pane after a late dinner. Dogs whose tails speak more clearly than their barks. Snow-covered foothills sliding into a red desert valley. The sound of your breath when I know you're not dreaming. Every single time you've pretended the touch was unintended. The newness of old carpet each time we arrange furniture. The steam on my mirror I blame for never shaving. Never hearing cyclists refer to their bikes as 10 speeds anymore. The first holiday greeting to arrive always being from your dentist. Being dispossessed of the idea that the French are better kissers. Developing a true love of dark chocolate so you never have to share with the kids. That time when the carpool lane functioned better than even its designers intended. And did I mention the perfectly temperate bowl of soup? Whether a thing matters or not is entirely a matter of perspective. This is a hill I am kind of willing to die on.
That was great. I Will Die on This Hill by Nate Jacob. Very fun. That was the closest anybody's gotten so far to a Rick Lupert type poem. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing that, Nate.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Yep. Take care. And then Nate Jacobs with I Will Die on This Hill. Let's go to Joe Nolan next.
Hey, Tim. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Joe?
Good. I've just got a short one.
Okay.
Forever leaves of brown. Trees may bear brown leaves throughout the winter. Some leaves never blow away. They cling from year to year as though affixed. Maybe they are worry mixed with fear, anger, and resentment, and cannot be let go, no matter how hard the wind may blow, reserving aging places where otherwise fresh green buds would grow.
That was Joseph Nolan with Forever Leaves of Brown. Excellent sounds as always, Joe. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep, have a good night. Next up, Brian O'Sullivan, I think a first-time caller.
Hi, yes, I am a first-time caller. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Brian. Where are you calling from?
From Southern Maryland.
Excellent.
St. Mary's County, Maryland.
Uh-huh. And what have you got for us?
So I sent a prompt poem.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull it up. Sorry, I had it ready to go. I wasn't able to keep my browser up. Well, I had Zoom up. 1 second.
No problem.
Okay, here it goes. So this is a poem to the prompt. It was a very spontaneous poem. One of the things I'm hoping is that it doesn't offend anyone. It's very spontaneous. Okay. It's called Doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
The pure men will say, "I won't let you be gay." They will say, "I said that Christians trump Moors, that beautiful things are dangerous lures, that your soul's in their hands, those sacred boors." And they'll even say your body's not yours. I say, love each other and don't listen to them. Look here where these forlorn horses bloom. Because of the pure men, I will die on this hill.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much. It was Doctrine. Thanks so much for sharing that, Brian. Yeah, good poem. Thanks so much, and good for you to join us. Hope you can join us again.
I will.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Brian O'Sullivan with Doctrine. And next up, we have Angela Gartner.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Angela. How you doing tonight?
Good. So no prompt poem and just a normal poem. Like I wrote for Poets Respond for a while, but it really is just could be like any day poem. But it's maybe one of my funnier poems.
Okay.
What maybe? Oh my gosh, it's not funny. Like no one's gonna think it's funny now.
That's funny.
I shouldn't have said that. It's not funny. So.
Okay.
It's just me being a mom. So.
Yeah, well, that's an important thing to be. I'm glad you are.
So, okay.
Okay.
The Mom Melodies. Little, my sweet child, the dishes are piling high. Let's go scrub the spoons. Mommy has to work tomorrow. Little, my sweet child, diapers dirty for a third time this hour. Let's go change and get clean. Hope you don't pee on me. Little, my sweet child, why did Jack sell his cow and trade it for some beans, only to walk in the lair of the child eater? Little, my sweet child, tucked you in twice, now go to sleep. Drink a glass of milk, a story to read, feel a cramp in my arm, but keep snuggling. Little, my sweet child, mommy has raccoon eyes, open wide for a yawn, sew in a robe and have my pajamas on. Little, my sweet child, I hear you screaming for me. A snack just spilled on the floor. Your sister is touching your toy. Little, my sweet child, you will grow up and leave. Your blue dog will be dusty. I will hug it and think of you.
Aw, that's both funny and sweet, I would say. Definitely. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Angela.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Yep, you too.
Thanks.
That was The Mom Melodies by Angela Gartner. Let's see, who is left? We got Jennifer Elise Wang here.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Jen, how you doing?
I'm good. I was working while you were talking with Joan, but yeah, I'm going to definitely give it a listen because definitely an important topic and
Yeah, for
one
sure.
that kind of hits home a little bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, it hits home for so many people. It's just such a, it's a topic that touches so many lives.
Yeah. But my poem, I did a prompt poem kind of last minute. I decided instead of actual hills I would die on to provide some culinary hot takes based on just some memes that were spread around about, like, is this a cake? Is this a pizza? Like all those things. So it wound up being this short little poem that I created.
Excellent. Let's hear it.
So, culinary hot takes. A hot dog is a sandwich. A Pop-Tart is a ravioli. A cheesecake is pie. Kale soup is a tea. These are the hills on which I will die.
That's great. Excellent. Culinary Hot Takes by Jennifer Elise Wang. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jen.
Thanks.
Yep. Good night. All right. So that was Jennifer Elise Wang with Culinary Hot Takes. And I think that's going to wrap it up for the Zoom. So I'm going to shut that down. If anyone if anybody on Zoom wants to keep watching, please do jump over to YouTube. But I shut this down and read a couple more poems from from poets who emailed poems in. So let's see what we've got here, because there's a bunch of poems in the inbox that are completely unopened, and I would like to share them all. So let's see. Here's a poem by, it's a prompt poem by JB Pen Name, as JB's going by, which is a very fun name. That was the poet who a couple weeks ago was here, and I didn't want to share a poem without saying who wrote it. And here we go. This is I on This Hill. A melodramatic prompt poem from JB Pen Name is what they decided to go with. And here we go. On this hill. On this hill. My mother and aunt talk about a friend whose husband left no will. He didn't believe in writing things down, and now their house is in a state of arbitration. He could have made it out on a cocktail napkin. Forensic accountant shrimping over his final horseradish stains. He could have schlepped up the nearest mountain and signed it into a field of clovers. The house goes to my wife. I will die on this hill. When I die, cover me in gold and shoot me into the sun. No, buy 10 acres upstate and dig me in square across from a cloudless day. Those before me are cemeteries now. It's not uncommon to buy a family plot, all the generations cuddling in the dirt. But what if we run out of room down there? Once I really thought I'd buy us a mausoleum, but why not bury me in the body of an email? I'd like my epitaph read by a corporate pencil pusher scrolling through memos on the toilet between the dells of 2 coffee breaks. I will die on this hill. I live up the road, loved in that valley over there, started my family in this clearing, as one does, and when I retire, it'll be on that mound across the way. See that rise that slumps like an old man, the knobby one that plummets at the center. I will die on that hill. Excellent. I love the... Why not bury me in the body of an email? That is a great line in that poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, JB. Let's see what else we have. So Nivity Karthik has one, of course, and I'm going to download her video, and I'll play it in a little bit after it downloads. Yeah, because I can't do it like that. I have to download it. Download anyway. Just 1 second. Okay, so once that downloads, we'll go back to Nivedita, which is always a pleasure. For now, let's hear Katie Dozier has a rondelle. And here we go. Sea Level Rondelle. And this is Katie Dozier. Sea Level Rondelle. I will die. On this hill I climb as though a cliff. Search these stones for glyphs. Ants scrounge for free will. Follow pheromones still. Puffing air, broken riffs. I will die on this hill. I climb as though a cliff. Pink sunset, light distilled. Prod summit dirt, outlive ants. Kick pebbles, airlift misconceptions. Dusk mill, I will die on this hill. Excellent. That is KHD, also known as Katie Dozier, with a rondelle, which is one of those French forms that I can never keep straight. Joan Kwon Glass was talking about that. And I don't know the rules for the rondelle. The villanelle I got. The pantoum I kind of understand. But rondelles are a mystery to me. That was excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that, Katie. Now let's go to Sharon Ferrante. Here's her. She has a silly haiku if we have time to read it. Here is the I Will Die on This Hill haiku from Sharon Ferrante. The top of a hill, a Mars bar. I will die on this hill. That's excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that, Sharon. A pleasure as always. Brent Stauffer. Beliefs. Brent Stauffer, I wonder why he's never sent a poem and not been here. I'm going to open up Zoom just in case he pops on. And maybe we'll swing back to Brent if he does. Let's see. Yeah, so if Brent, if you're there and want to pop on, because a lot of times Brent pops on late, we will reopen this really quick for Brent. But I'll move back if he doesn't appear. And here is this is The Lyric of Fun by Mary Ann Abdo, another poet who is usually on the Zoom. But we'll leave that open for a second too, just in case. And here's Ted Bernal Guevara. This is his poem from last week. And remember, last week's prompt was to write a poem inspired by your favorite poet. And so Ted, last week, we didn't have enough time to get to Ted, but he said Pablo Neruda is said to have written a profound erotic poems at age 13, and it helped him be recognized by a top Chilean publication at the time, launching his Nobel Prize-bound career. My poem Blunt here is short of being erotica, but it is along Neruda's taste. Also, there's a hit song of the same love miss opportunity theme sang by the artist James Blunt. And as always, he gives us a little preview in the form of a visual. And this is people dancing some kind of dance. I'm not an expert in dances. What is this? I don't know. Anyway, let's see the poem. And the poem is Blunt. Taxi speed eliminates debutante's eyelashes on my neck. Their length are the blinks of my dream. Fantasy is rung too long in the air that it lassos crave. And worse, worships. Taxi speed makes the flan sweeter and lessen the count of eggs they were made of. I could not tell if she had turned around to see the tango on stage. That's it. It was a tango. I don't know. That's the easiest dance to remember. Anyway, let's go switch to this too. Yeah, I don't know. Something's going on weird. Anyway, Taxi Speed says it was still empty. The hard floor lure of the mad balletic dancers. Ah, she turned to simply sample my look, to see if I, myself, was in her snare. Taxi Speed says I'm already in the fall, to land somewhere alone with her. Her bow across glasses of wine disintegrates in that room, and I'm free to own. Taxi Speed says, you are too blunt. Disciplina del tango would have bowed upon your crest. You would have sighed, claiming the clasp is euphoric, and you must hover still. Taxi Speed bears no rules. She had gotten up, straightened her skirt. Your eyes in the dark agree and disagree. Yes, you are snagged. Your dissolving would never stop. All the world is a back seat. All the night is red satin from 3 tables back. Now all is in an embrace, her alone beside you. All now is unowned. She didn't have to entice. Even with the tango, you felt her gaze, her lashes at your nape. The falling, the courting, lifetime all flew out the taxi's window. Very cool. Thanks so much for sharing that, Ted. And I love that one of those lines up there. Yeah, let me fix this, though. This is the wrong video. Did my camera die? I don't know. Anyway, that was Ted Bernal-Guevara with Pablo Neruda, his favorite poet, and Blunt as the poem. And let's go back to Nivedita Karthik, who has this poem for this week. And here we go for Nivedita. Let me make sure I get this right. We'll end this stream. Sorry, I'm kind of bumbling. I have a little too many windows up right now. And then Nivedita's poem is here. And then I can open it like that. Sorry, bear with me, everybody. But there this goes. Okay, so we got Nivedita up here, and I can show it by using... Let's see, we have Nivedita's poem, screen view, and then if I do... this one, right? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so there's Nivedita, and this is her poem for the prompt, and the poem is right here, The Choice. So here's Nivedita Karthik reading The Choice.
Hello, my name is Nivedita, and this is my attempt at the prompt poem for Rattlecast. So it's titled The Choice. The choice. The choice is mine to make, and I will die on this hill, surrounded by wildflowers and long green grass. Bright is the smile I used to have, with the raging river by my side, leaping past the rocky obstacles like I used to, in the dappled shade of the deodar trees that have soft barks just like I used to, with many golden globes of sunlight streaming down on me like my eyes used to light up. But the choice is not mine to make, and I did not die on this hill. Instead, I sit amid those wildflowers, considering my reasons to smile, with the now dried up river gasping by my side, wondering how to surmount those once easy obstacles. Beneath the bare branches of the deodar trees, the peeling barks hard against my back, under the harsh yellow glare of the sun, causing me to cover my eyes. So no, none of us have a choice, the choice, for if we did, we would all wish for the same. And this is what I think as I sit on the hill, and I will die on this hill. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks as always. I was Nibby Karthik. Sorry the volume was a little low. I was trying to fix it and couldn't amp it up enough. But let me return it to normal so it doesn't blast next time somebody reads. Okay. It was Nibby Karthik with a wonderful poem, The Choice. Thanks so much. That was a great prompt poem. It was a hard prompt, and people are coming up with good stuff here. So Brent Stauffer didn't appear on the Zoom. Let's read Brent's poem, Belief. Here's Brent's firmly held belief. Or firmly held beliefs, I should say. Oops. Get rid of that. Okay. There. Firmly Held Beliefs by Brent Stauffer. Hot dogs are sandwiches, and I will die on this hill. Tea is water with leaves in it, and I will die on this hill. Chili is chunky soup, and I will die on this hill. Semicolons are beautiful, Oxford commas necessary, punctuation saves lives, and I will die on this hill. Democrats are evil, Republicans are evil, and I will die on this hill. My God is better than your God, and I will die on this hill. Awful hilly around here. Buzzards wheel in the sky, filled with both hunger and joy. Oh, excellent turn at the end. That was great. Thanks so much, Brent. Sorry you couldn't be here to read that live. I knew you'd come up with a good poem for that one. That was Firmly Held Beliefs by Brent Stauffer from the I Will Die on This Hill prompt. And last but not least, we have another prompt poem, I believe. This is from Marianne Abdo. And this is Lyrics Are Fun. Maybe it's not a prompt poem. Did you say anything about it? It came about after an evening of writing serious subject matter poetry, and I needed a diversion of a fun poem. Well, that's great. We definitely do. Let's read Mary Ann's Abdo's fun poem here. The lyrics of fun, she says. Let's hear it. The lyrics of fun. Please joke. Please love. Live to say never. Going to work can be no fun, but make it fun. Don't be so sad. Life can be long and yet so short. Money is not always important. Listening to you two, where streets have many names, only the ones you cross to escape the doldrums. Lunch in a brown paper bag is exciting fun. A disposal meal on the run. Driving through parking lots, closing the closet door on those lime green gym pants. So fun and alluring. Retired me is a decade away. I hear adult children all day long. Free lunches while listening to pharmacy and home health reps. Across time, my words are occasionally unknown to others. I am alive to find smiles wandering down the hallway. My history of words, I hope, will help others find that are really never alone. My jazz is musical words that are addictive, like limoncello. Crooning and misunderstood words, dropping them off obscurely. Songs are words, and words are like songs. Wise men and women smolder with hands intertwined. Remembering that poems are lines between pages of my notebook. Celebration of those poets yet to be haunting, discovered. Unspoken words triggering the need for expression, for maybe it will bring our world together. Yeah, excellent thoughts. That's the lyrics of fun. Thanks so much for sharing that, Marianne. I do hope poetry brings our world together for sure. Clayton Clark's got one too. And she's a little bit under the weather, so can't read, but would love for us to read this. And I'd love to read it for sure. Here's Clayton Clark's poem, Question for the Almighty. And this is a prompt poem too, so here we go with this one. Question for the Almighty. I felt him sneak up behind me again, fast this time. I turned, looked him right in the face, a big no-no, but I suffered no fear. He stumbled back, tripped in his sloppy sandals, and sat on the floor. The billowy white night shirt he wore made him seem puny. A bush burned in each eye. Hey, I said, why did the chicken cross the road? Wrong question, he replied. Oh, go ask that clown running downhill on the other side. You mean the hill I will die on? That's great. That was Clayton Clark with Question for the Almighty. The hill I will die on prompt poem. And I believe, here is another one. This is my first haiku poem. This is Biswajit Mishra. And Biswajit says, here's my first haiku poem, 3 frames and a picture for the Rattlecast. Hope this complies with the requirements of the last line, I will die on this hill. So here we go, 3 frames and a picture. 1. Snow shrouds the mountain peaks, waiting for Chinook to break the frigidity, fireplace, wine, and movie help. 2. Christmas lights sparkle all night. Holiday fervor is getting on the anvil, while days are getting shorter. 3. Dark, quiet nights linger long. Hopefully the snow brightens up the moonlight, and magpies chatter start sunny mornings. Picture lost in reverie on Sunday, dodging grocery shopping, getting hot brunch, and I will die on this hill. Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was 3 frames and a picture. Interesting, really interesting form, too. 3 frames and a picture. I haven't seen that before. I like it. And that was Biswajit Mishra. Thanks so much for sharing that. Okay, that, I believe, is the last poem for tonight. Let's go with, you know what? I forgot to read the yesterday's prompt poem because Andrew wasn't here. He's Andrew Posner was the Sunday poet for Poets Respond, and he was on a plane flight all night tonight, so he wasn't able to make it. And hopefully there are a few Chinese names. Hopefully I'll say them all right, but I don't know if I will. Apologize in advance if I don't. But this is Blank by Andrew Posner, yesterday's Poets Respond poem, and I'll read Andrew's note to start. Andrew writes, I'm watching the blank paper protests in China from the comfort of my home, wondering how I would react were I living under such an authoritarian regime. Then again, the authoritarian streak in America is ever looming, so perhaps the question of my response to such circumstances is not so moot. That is Andrew Posner's comment on this poem, Blank, which was Sunday's Poets Respond poem, and the epigraph from Newsweek. Blank sheets of white paper were a symbol of defiance over the weekend as Chinese protesters braved likely prosecution to openly oppose the government's policy of zero tolerance for COVID and public dissent. That was the epigraph, and here is Andrew Posner's poem, Blank. I will stare blankly at the page, wanting to fill it with meaning. In Xinjiang, 7,000 miles away, a morning sun reflecting off the glasses of early risers, the windshields of commuters, is so bright as to redact last night's graffiti, down with G. The people smiling, the wry smile of the long aggrieved, hold up blank pages and say nothing, while everywhere censors, police, apparatchiks, always listening, watching, fill page after page with names, addresses, offenses. Zhang Wei disrespected the party. Li Nai seeks to sabotage the social order. In Los Angeles, I am busy besmirching the page, smearing it with ink, as though covering the purest snow in de-icing salt. The snow melts down to mud. Poetry reduces to a mush of guttural sounds incomprehensible to the moment. Heaving a sigh, I make a double espresso, add a splash of cream and sugar, savor each peaceful sip. Outside, a hawk, saying nothing, carries off a rabbit in its talons. Is this the natural order of things? For once, I hear the tearing of flesh, see the sky torn blood red. No one will apprehend me here, cup in hand, crumpled paper on the floor, blank visage, belying the seeds of treason. But were they to try, which treason would I admit, and which would I deny? That was yesterday's prompt poem, a very important topic of what's going on in China right now. That was Blank by Andrew Posner. One of those poems that I didn't really know what was going on there. I've been a little bit oblivious. A very busy week. I didn't watch the news as much and didn't realize how significant the events that are going on there are. That was Blank by Andrew Posner. Thanks for sharing that. And that's going to wrap up the show except for the haiku, or Sciku. And the Sciku for this week was inspired by this story from MIT. Let me pull it up. This is Silent synapses are abundant in the adult brain. These immature connections may explain how the adult brain is able to form new memories and absorb new information. And so basically they'd looked at the synapses inside mice, and a long time ago realized that young mice have a ton of these unused silent synapses, they're called. And they assume they turn on as you learn new memories and learn things. But the thought in neuroscience was that as adults we don't have many of these at all, and we're kind of filled up already. And what they found by accident were that these there are many millions of silent synapses in our brains now, which are helping form memories even now. So, you don't want to have to overwrite your old neurons to make new memories. You want to keep your old memories while making new ones too. And it turns out that this is how we do it. We have a whole bunch that are just silent and ready to turn on when we need to form a memory. And so in an interesting way, it's kind of like your brain could get full, in theory, if you run out of these silent synapses, possibly. But that is the story which caught my eye this week from MIT, and here is the Sciku inspired by it. Memories on top of memories, smoothing stone. Memories on top of memories, smoothing stone. That is your Sciku for the day, and that is your show for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. It's been a pleasure, as always. Really wonderful guest tonight with Joan Kwon Glass. And Joan has a prompt for us. So here is the prompt. Right here. Victoria Chang radically changes the way in which we regard obituaries by writing an entire poetry collection using obits as a form. I think it's called obits, right? Or just obit. But here's write an obituary for one of the following: a previous version of yourself, a friendship or romantic relationship, a body part, your adult child's childhood, or for someone who has not died but that you've lost. And she included a link to one of Eugenia Leigh's poems, who we talked about, and was on Rattlecast 68 or whatever we said. Eugenia's poem is 1 year after my dying father and I stopped speaking to each other again. And that is a poem to inspire you by Eugenia Leigh. I'll post the link to that in the show notes later on once I post the prompt. You can also find it at rattle.com/rattlecast, like you can always find the weekly prompts. Hope you write a poem about that, and hope you share it next week on the open lines. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Elaine Sexton. And Elaine was in the Appalachian Poets issue. Her newest book, Drive, I think it was one of the poetry bestsellers of the year this year. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know a whole bunch. We published Elaine once, I believe. So it's one of those fun for me poets where I get to meet a totally new poet that I have no idea really much about at all. It's going to be a lot of fun. Her book is Drive. Really looking forward to reading that. Looking forward to hearing your prompt poems too. That is next week, Rattlecast number 172, Monday, December 12th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and I will talk to you later. Good night.